So, today I'm going to be discussing natural selection versus genetic drift. So, what is natural selection? Well, it is a mechanism of evolution. So, a great example is antibiotic resistance, which is something you might have heard of because it's something that occurs a lot in humans. So, bacterial infections in humans are commonly treated with antibiotics. However, because of their overuse and misuse, some pathogenic bacteria has become resistant to some of these treatments. This is also dangerous for humans because treatments that use to cure potentially fatal diseases are now less effective in some cases, or not effective at all. So, the misuse of antibiotics is very harmful to the body because it could potentially make it very hard for you to fight diseases. So, when you have an infection, the multiplying pathogenic bacteria inside of you are not all identical. Most of them are the same, but every now and again, one of them will be slightly different genetically. If they were all genetically identical, they would react to their environment in the same way and all be harmed by the same things. One harmful thing could wipe out the entire species. But they are all slight genetic differences. Harmful conditions like the presence of an antibiotic might kill most of the pathogenic bacteria, but some may be better to survive than thrive. These characteristics are favored in this environment, so these bacteria can continue to thrive and make you ill. Different environments favor different traits, and so natural selection has taken place. So, what is genetic drift? Genetic drift is basically a change in allele frequency due to a chance event. So, for the example that I have, it is about a rabbit population. So, as we can see, the dominant allele, which is the brown rabbits, which is capital BB, is the dominant population over the white rabbits, which is lowercase bb. So, the reason that the brown rabbit population has taken over is because of the dominant allele. And so now, because of the white rabbit's recessive allele, which is lowercase bb, that means that they're not going to be as dominant, which is fine, but it just means that they're not the dominant population, and that means whatever environment that they're in, they're not doing well, and they're not being fit, which means producing the amount of, animals that they should to have a good place in the environment. So, there are two representations of genetic drift. The first one being the bottleneck effect, which actually I am representing by a bottle. So bottleneck effect is an extreme example of genetic drift that happens when the size of a population is severely reduced. Events like natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, fires can decimate a population, killing most individuals and leaving behind a small, random assortment of survivors. So, how can a bottleneck event reduce genetic diversity? Well, if you imagine a bottle filled with marbles, like I have here, the marbles represent the individuals in the population. If a bottleneck event occurs, a small random assortment of individuals survive the event and pass through the bottleneck and, into the cup. So, while the vast majority of the population is killed, which is what remains in the bottle, the genetic composition of the random survivors is now the genetic composition of the entire population. So as we can see here, the population is being poured into the bottle cup, which is now the surviving population of the original. So, now we have the founder effect. So, my example is the Galapagos finches, which is actually very famous because Charles Darwin was the first one to study these birds. So, these finches have been studied for a long time, but it is hypothesized that the small colonies of finches were established on each island when storms would carry them far away from the coastline. Due to the smaller number of finches that arrived at each island, each population had only certain alleles from the parent population. Over time, the populations varied greatly, both in their size and their roles, and filled with the ecosystem. So, as we can see from the pictures, the different beaks represent the different populations of birds that have come and changed the allele frequencies within these birds when they have mated and, populated. So now, how does genetic drift and natural selection are similar? So, the reason they are similar is because, as you can see from all the examples, they have a very big change in allele frequencies, and they both majorly affect evolution. So as you can see in this picture, you can see how genetic drift and how natural selection are very big and key components to how populations survive. Now, how they are not similar is because they are different based on how they cause allele frequencies to change. So, as you can see from genetic drift, they change based on the dominance and recessiveness of the alleles, but also with genetic drift, it depends on their environment. And with the bottleneck effect, there is an extreme amount of change based on how the population is affected. So, like I said, earthquakes and fires can affect the environment, which then displaces the animals that are surviving in it. And then, as we can see from natural selection, the antibiotic resistance is a very key component in, how humans survive. So, overall, that is how they are not so similar. So, this is my works cited, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.